Welcome to another edition of the Road Weather Spotlight series. Today's topics that will be covered by our presenters are avalanche forecasting, mitigation, and research. As Kyla mentioned, my name is Jeremy McGuffey. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration Office of Operations in the Road Weather Management Program. If you're not familiar, the Road Weather Management Program is responsible for mitigating the impact of severe weather across the transportation network, ultimately improving safety and mobility. We do this through a couple of methods. One is stakeholder engagement and outreach, such as today when we do these webinars. But we also do road weather research and development projects. We perform technology transfer and deployment support. And then we also have training modules, and we perform training out there as well. Next slide. I do have some disclaimers that I have to go through real quick. These are on all of our presentations, but I'll read this real quick. This presentation was created and is being co-presented by both the Federal Highway Administration and an outside entity. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of FHWA or the U.S. Department of Transportation. The contents do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the U.S. DOT. The U.S. government does not endorse products or manufacturers. Trademarks or manufacturers' names appear in this presentation only because they are considered essential to the objective of the presentation. They are included for informational purposes only and are not intended to reflect a preference, approval, or endorsement of any one product or entity. Except for the statutes and regulations cited, the contents of this presentation do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the states or the public in any way. This presentation is intended only to provide information regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. Next slide. All right, for today's agenda, I'll just briefly give you an overview before we get into things. Avalanche forecasting, mitigation, research. Between our three presenters here, we have Brian Corsage with Colorado Department of Transportation. We have Ethan Green, who leads the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. And then we have Stephen Clark, who works in avalanche forecasting and mitigation in the Utah Department of Transportation. Next slide. All right, so first on the docket here is Brian Corsage. Brian is the Avalanche Program Manager for the Colorado Department of Transportation, overseeing statewide avalanche mitigation operations to protect the traveling public and CDOT crews. Brian has been forecasting and mitigating avalanches since 2004 and leads efforts to advance mitigation technology, training, and field readiness across Colorado's most challenging terrain. All right, Brian, I'll pass things over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Can we go next slide? All right, so the CDOT Avalanche Safety Program, our mission is to reduce the risk of avalanches to people and property on state and federal roadways. This risk is reduced and accomplished with avalanche forecasting and our control program. And we do that in partnership with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. Next slide. In the CDOT Avalanche Atlas, there's over 500 documented avalanche paths that can affect Colorado highways throughout the western half of the state. 180 of those receive regular mitigation. The CIC dedicates 8 avalanche forecasters across the state there that are just dedicated to forecasting those roadways. CDOT has 70 mitigation personnel that are licensed by the state of Colorado to use explosives and use the tools for mitigation. Next slide. So why does avalanche safety matter? Colorado has significant exposure to avalanche hazards through all our mountain corridors. It's very steep terrain directly above roadways. Colorado historically has a weak snow structure, and we have very high traffic volumes. And avalanches can impact public and worker safety, commerce, tourism, and local economies and emergency response. This is a core safety function of CDOT's winter operation in mountain corridors, which helps maintain reliability. Next slide. So the CDOT Avalanche Program, it's one of the largest and most complex avalanche programs in North America. It protects Interstate 70 along, near the Eisenhower Tunnel on both sides, east and west of the tunnel. And, during large winter storms, during ski season, we can see Upwards of 40,000 cars a day go through that corridor. So it's a high demand corridor. We also do mitigation on Wolf Creek Pass, which is a major east to west route through the state of Colorado, Red Mountain Pass, and Berthoud Pass. There are numerous other routes that receive mitigation and forecasting, and those routes can also serve as alternates if we're having large storm cycles and long-term closures on some of those other routes. We operate 24/7 during winter storm cycles. In the Avalanche Safety Program and CIC, we operate year-round. The second we are done using winter is over, we are maintaining all of our devices throughout the state and beginning our training for the next winter. Next slide. So like I said before, we do this in partnership with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, another state agency. We have an interagency agreement with them, and they provide daily avalanche forecasting for us for winter operations. And their work is informed by weather forecasting and models, snowpack observations and field data, and historical avalanche information. And basically, the way it works with them is they're monitoring the snowpack and determining when it's no longer acceptable to keep a roadway open without doing mitigation. They will make that mitigation recommendation to CDOT, and then we will implement the mitigation. Next slide. So we're really fortunate here in the state of Colorado. We pretty much have all the devices available to mitigate avalanches. And we use those tools to match the terrain and our risk tolerance. And we use these tools proactively. So we'll go in, we get our mitigation recommendation from the CIAC, and we will close and sweep the road, make sure everybody's out of the way, and then use one of these devices to mitigate the avalanche down on our terms. We do have 49 remote avalanche control devices across the state. Numerous supporting devices for those RACS units, and one of the largest artillery programs in the Western US for mitigating avalanches. Next slide. And we also have passive avalanche mitigation methods throughout the state of Colorado. We have snow sheds, we have snow supporting structures, and earthen mounds. And those tools are, in order of magnitude, way more expensive than the devices I just talked about, but we do have a few, and they can either eliminate avalanches from starting, allow avalanche debris to flow over a roadway, or slow and redistribute the avalanche debris. Next slide. So, we've been operating howitzers for avalanche control for a very long time, decades. And we're looking to reduce our dependency on that artillery. Those units are, the artillery pieces are 80 years old. They're World War II era. And, within the last decade or two, there's been some real development in what we call them RACS, remote avalanche control systems, and have been implementing those slowly throughout the last decade or so to, like I said, to reduce that dependency on artillery. The RACs are wonderful tools. They allow us to work in all conditions, and they can operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're also improving our weather stations and real-time monitoring. And those real-time monitoring is like avalanche detection. We're tiptoeing into drones. We'll use drones for maintenance inspections of our rack stuff that are permanently mounted in high elevation starting zones. And then we will also use it to document large scale avalanche cycles. And all of that data, really helps us reduce our exposure to our personnel, our maintenance workers. They're the ones driving around under these roadways or on the roadways underneath these avalanche paths, and they have the highest exposure, and it also helps us with operational efficiency. Next slide. So all of this work, across the state, very, very busy place, lots of demands, requires quite a bit of coordination. And we do, we're constantly communicating with the maintenance staff, our traffic operations staff, state patrol, local municipalities, and all of our stakeholders. Um, we distribute that data on our cotrip.org website and through social media and local media partners. And, decisions that we make, especially along the I-70 corridor, they can have a ripple effect outside of that corridor down through Denver and into neighboring states. So it's coordination at scale, and it's a very, very important part of what we do. Next slide. Okay, you can play this video. So this is a little case study of a recent upgrade to our avalanche control program. We are mitigating an avalanche path that's about 1 mile east of the Eisenhower Tunnel on a holiday weekend during about 3 or 4 feet of snowfall. During this cycle, we were rather fortunate in that the second bullet out the tube that day triggered this large avalanche, just above I-70. There are some earthen mounds that I discussed earlier that help divert this debris flow away from I-70. And as you can see here, that this is a fairly impressive avalanche. There's the diversion dam right there. And so we basically put no debris on the roadway. Second bullet out the tube. This is, best case scenario for us. We're done mitigating within, a matter of minutes, and, a quick reopen to the roadway. As good as we can do. Unfortunately with the howitzer, we do have to do it at daylight hours. So we're right now we're heavily impacting westbound traffic from Denver that's trying to get up to the mountains to go skiing for all this new snow, like I said, on the holiday weekend. Next slide. So here's a graph from our operations center, and basically you can see that black triangle on the left. That's 7 a.m. avalanche control, and those dark red colors as you move to the right, that's as the day progresses. And there's quite a bit of red and purples in there before we get to green. And green indicates that the corridor has resumed normal highway speeds. So I love this graph because it really illustrates that, a very quick mitigation mission, productive mission, had hours of ripple effect on that corridor before it resumed back to normal speeds. So with that, in this particular case, we chose to implement a remote avalanche control system this summer that's now ready to go. And basically what we can do is one closure from that corridor westbound for another 8 miles. We are all remote avalanche control systems. So we can do one closure, 4 in the morning, mitigate 8 miles of interstate, and reopen before ski traffic flows in earnest. Next slide. So our program value and the path ahead. Like I said, we protect life and property while supporting national and regional economies. We aim to reduce our closure duration on key freight and tourism corridors, improve resiliency for travelers and carriers after our mitigation is completed. And our strongest return on investment for implementing these devices, the cost that it takes to run an avalanche mitigation is our return on investment is avoided through delays. And as quickly as we can reopen roadways and maintain that resiliency. Our continued focus will be on national leadership, modernization and resiliency of our corridors, and in winter mobility. And that's all I have for CDOT Avalanche Program.
Well, Yeah, that was great stuff there, Brian. I made a note here too. I saw that number up top whenever you first started presenting, that you currently keep an eye on 500 plus avalanche paths affecting CDOT highways. That was impressive and makes me appreciate the role that you play even more. So great stuff
Thank
there. Um,
Appreciate
I'll remind everyone, if you have questions for any of our presenters today, I know Kyla already mentioned it. We have a Q&A button there at the bottom on your toolbar. Just go ahead and click that. If you have a question, you can type in your question there, and then it'll allow our presenters to answer it in real time. We'll also have some time set aside if there's outstanding questions at the end to address those. Our next presenter is Ethan Green. Ethan has directed the Colorado Avalanche Information Center since 2005 and has worked with snow and avalanches since 1990, including ski patrolling, public forecasting, authoring dozens of publications, and teaching at the college level. He has an academic background in atmospheric science and has been a member of national and international working groups on snow, weather, and avalanche topics. Ethan, welcome, and I'll pass things over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. And yeah, thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure to talk to everybody and see everybody on the chats today. So I work for the Department of Natural Resources in the state of Colorado. Like Brian said, we're a partner agency of CDOT and state government. We're tasked with really dealing with avalanches across the state for all applications. And working with Brian and CDOT is a huge part of what we do for the transportation aspect of that. But we also forecast for backcountry recreation across the state and help with search and rescue, deal with support local governments as they do hazard planning and a variety of things around avalanches as this natural hazard. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start by talking just very generally about what avalanches are, because for us, this is really kind of where we start when we're thinking about how to promote avalanche safety or manage an avalanche hazard like we do for the transportation corridors. And so avalanches really describe a very wide array of events. In general, it's snow moving down an inclined slope. That can be a fairly small event that's harmless to a person. It can be big enough to push a car off a road or destroy a vehicle. It can also be large enough to gouge the Earth's surface and really be a geomorphological event. And so we're trying to kind of deal with all of those. And these two pictures here on the left, you're looking at what we call a loose snow avalanche. So these are really similar to what you'd see in dirt or sand, where you have a bunch of loose particles moving down the hill and entraining mass as they go. But the avalanches that are the most dangerous for people and most important for managing transportation corridors are what we see on the right, which is a slab avalanche where a large cohesive block of snow peels off from the hillside and rolls down into the valley. Next slide, please. This is a map showing the avalanche deaths in the United States since 1950. In this period, kind of 1950 to today, most of these deaths are from some sort of recreational activity, people out skiing, snowmobiling, climbing, things like that. There are some transportation-related fatalities represented here, but I felt like this was a good thing to show you just because it kind of gives you an indication of where in the United States we see avalanche hazard really having a big impact on people. So most of the Western state DOTs have some sort of avalanche problem that they have to deal with. You can generally say the bigger the number in the state, the bigger the problem for the DOT. But most of those Western states have some sort of issue that they're dealing with. And Stephen will talk a little bit more about kind of the partnerships that we have across those groups. Next slide, please. So Brian covered some of this, but just in general, like avalanches are a natural hazard. And like all natural hazards, we can't remove them completely for the most part, but we can do a lot to manage that hazard, especially as it relates to things that we care about, infrastructure, roadways, buildings, things like that. And so the partnership the program that Brian and I work on, and Stephen does a very similar work in Utah, is really focused on identifying these hazardous areas, both in time and space, um, and then managing that hazard for the transportation workers, the maintenance workers, and also the traveling public. And we do that through closing roads and then sometimes doing active or passive mitigation, active being the explosive systems that Brian was talking about, passive, those defense structures, and then opening up the road when it's safe for people to travel on. Next slide. So here's a general approach that we use for addressing avalanche safety for a transportation corridor. And this is, again, really general, something that we apply both to state and federal highways and some county roads in Colorado, but really similar approach that Stephen takes and other folks in the Western United States that are running these programs. So I'm just going to kind of step down through these three sort of processes of hazard mapping, forecasting and mitigation, and then training and communication, mostly for maintenance workers, but we can extend that a little bit to the general public as well. Next slide. So here's a Google Earth image looking at the town of Silverton in southwest Colorado. We're looking to the north. You can see US 550 that Brian mentioned running out to the right, or sorry, to the left of your screen there. And as we look across this area, there's a huge amount of mountainous areas, slanted terrain, and in the wintertime, this is all going to be covered with snow. And so we'll have avalanche hazard just dispersed all through this area. Part of our job at the CAIC is describing that avalanche hazard for everybody across the state. But when we are working with CDOT, we're really focusing in on places that impact the roadways. And so the first thing that we need to do for either of those applications is really try to confine our problem a little bit more. The slab avalanches that we're most worried about happen on slopes that are between 30 degrees and 50 degrees. And so that's the first thing that we'll do is just start to look at the terrain that is capable of producing avalanches in that slope band. Next slide, please. And so here are those slopes shaded, again, between 30 and 50 degrees in steepness. And so we can start to focus our efforts on these areas as we're trying to describe the avalanche danger across this whole area. But when we go to transportation corridors, next slide, we really are just interested in the avalanche paths that are going to run down onto the highway. So we can confine that yet again and really focus our efforts on these very specific slopes. And so instead of trying to describe the avalanche danger across a broad area like we would for the backcountry, for the highways, we're focusing in on these very specific areas. Like Brian said, over 500 avalanche paths and I think about 37 road corridors across Colorado. Next slide. So once we have an idea of the areas that we're concerned about, we can go into this kind of forecasting and mitigation process. And I've written it as a circle here because it really is an iterative process where we collect data. We're also added numerical modeling to that over the last couple of decades. Use that information to analyze the hazard and make an assessment that we can refine based on our application, whether it's transportation corridor or something else. For the transportation corridor, we'll do that explosive testing and hazard mitigation that Brian was talking about. And one of the things that's really important to understand is it is really explosive testing. We are trying to release avalanches, but whether we release them or not, that is really important information that we can then put back into the forecasting process and do another kind of lap around this track. So this is something that is sort of ongoing, really starting from before the first snowflake falls and continuing until the last bit of snow melts off the hillside. Next slide. So just a little basics about snow and how it relates to avalanches. The seasonal snow cover that we all deal with, the three of us deal with, is a layered structure. And these layers are formed by different weather events. And really any weather event will have an impact on the snowpack that could be important for avalanches. So If you cut down into the snowpack in the wintertime, you'll see this layered structure, kind of similar to what you might see if you did a cross section in a tree. And every snowstorm, every wind event, every rain event, even periods of calm weather with clear skies will produce layers in the snowpack. And that's really important because the slab avalanches we're talking about break at the interfaces of those layers. So we really want to understand them and know how they relate to each other. Next slide. So here is looking into the snowpack. We have, you can see kind of the layers formed on the left there. And another important thing to consider in this is that we're not dealing with a bunch of loose particles like we saw in that first slide in the loose snow avalanches. For slab avalanches, we're dealing with this layered sintered structure where each one of those layers is has lots of connection points, and so that material is acting much more like a solid or a foam than a bunch of loose particles. And so the processes that we're dealing with need to be considered in that framework. Next slide, please. The process that produces these slab avalanches is a collapse failure that then can propagate over large distances. And the layers that form in the snowpack allow this process to happen or prevent this process from propagating over large distances. And so a lot of what we're doing is both anticipating layers that form in the snowpack that will allow this to happen, and then also tracking where they are in time and space and what their characteristics are. Next slide, please. The systems that Brian was talking about cause explosives or release explosives that produce avalanches, but you really don't need explosives to do this. Under the right conditions, very small perturbations in the system will produce a large output. So here's a skier going down a hillside. He's gone past the steep area of the slope. He's getting down towards the bottom of the slope where he's able to start that crack that shoots up, confuses his cameraman, and releases this large avalanche that then runs down the hill. So in this case, a really small input to the system, a skier going across a flat part of the slope, is able to release tons of debris that roll down the hillside. So a lot of what we're doing with the explosive work that Brian's talking about is identifying these conditions. We can't do this work at any time. We need to wait for these conditions where closing the road is going to allow us to have a real benefit to reducing the hazard and then open it up again so that we're not causing those big red streaks in Brian's graph. Avalanche conditions vary in time and space, and so a lot of what we're doing in our data collection is looking at pattern recognition. Location, like one or multiple road corridors, the direction that a different slope faces, a particular elevation band where avalanches may be more prone to start, and then really trying to understand the characters of those avalanches. In this slide, you see avalanches breaking at a particular elevation across a specific slope aspect. And this also helps us understand the size of the avalanche because the size of the avalanche is going to be obviously really important for the function of the road corridor. Next slide, please. So here's just some examples of different size avalanches that can have really drastically different impacts on the road corridor, but all having a big impact on public mobility. So on the left, a very large avalanche overrunning the highway, kind of similar to the one that Brian showed you with the being released by the howitzer. In the middle, a fairly small avalanche, but enough to block the road where you're going to need heavy equipment to clear something off. And then on the right side, a small avalanche really only covering one lane, but enough to back up traffic and get people out of their cars, which makes them much more vulnerable to other avalanches that might be releasing off similar facing slopes. Next slide, please. And like Brian was talking about, the biggest impact that we have on of highways is debris removal. And so, if at all possible, we want to do that explosive work that Brian was talking about in a way so that it does not impact the road. A best possible scenario for us is releasing an avalanche that moves mass out of that steep part of the hillside, out of the start zone, down towards the road, but not touching the road. And so that is our ultimate goal in the forecasting program. Next slide. So here's just a little bit about our data collection. So we've identified the areas that we're interested in. We understand the phenomena. Then we're going to go out and collect data so we can understand this. A lot of this work is done just boots on the ground, on skis or snowmobiles, going into the hills, digging down into the snow, and doing like mechanical tests, identifying those layers, tracking those layers in time and space. We also spend a lot of time driving around and sometimes talking to maintenance personnel to sort of see what they're observing. We run our own remote weather station network. We operate study plots. We're making consistent measurements. And then off on the right side of this panel is a series of numerical modeling efforts that we do. We run our own version of the WRF numerical weather prediction model. And then we also have a model chain simulating the snow structure and those important mechanical characteristics. Next slide, please. After we've collected data and dug through all the model output, we do analysis of the avalanche conditions, both thinking about the size of avalanches and which highway paths are going to be impacted by this, which ones are most likely to produce avalanches. Next slide, please. And then once we get those hazard assessments, we communicate that to Brian and his team so that they can start working on either maintenance operations or mitigation plans. On the left here is an example of the email that we'll send out to them for each particular road corridor, where we have some kind of general description of what's happening, a chance of a mitigation mission being recommended over the next week. And then we'll actually tell them what we think the hazard is in each particular avalanche path with a map and mile markers so that the maintenance workers that are out on the road know which areas to be most concerned about and which areas they can operate independently. The rating system is really based on those operational procedures, what kind of equipment they should be carrying, whether they need to be working in teams or they can work individually, whether they should avoid stationary work under different avalanche paths, etc. And then we also train as a team, both maintenance workers and CAIC forecasters together, so that everybody understands what to do with the rescue equipment that they're carrying and what to do if there is an accident and we have to respond. There's been a number of incidents where CDOT personnel have been first on scene for both highway and backcountry avalanche accidents, and that training has produced some really good outcomes in the past. Next slide, please. That's all that I have for you today, so I'll hand it back over to Jeremy and Stephen.
All right. Thank you, Ethan, for highlighting the great work that you guys do there, your multi-agency partnership with CDOT, and also for your leadership there at the CAIC. I think this has been pretty eye-opening. Yeah, keep up the great work. Next up, we have Stephen Clark. Stephen is from Salt Lake City, Utah, and began working with the Utah Department of Transportation in 2013 and is currently the Avalanche Program Manager. Additionally, he is the chair of the Transportation Avalanche Research Pooled Fund and facilitates snow and avalanche research projects in the Wasatch Mountains. In addition to his UDOT responsibilities, he is an adjunct professor at the University of Utah in the Atmospheric Sciences Department and an instructor for the American Avalanche Institute. Stephen, welcome, and I'll pass things over to you.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I was happy to present when I was approached about this to this group of people. So hopefully this is enlightening. Like Jeremy said, yeah, my name is Stephen Clark. I'm the current chair of the Transportation Avalanche Research Pool, along with the co-chair Tim Glassett from the Alaska Department of Transportation. We are really kind of tasked with running the monthly meetings and kind of facilitating the different project updates and project presentations that the TARP voting members receive. The Colorado Department of Transportation is the lead organization for the TARP pooled fund. So that means that the TARP organization is operating under the CDOT procurement and organizational kind of rule structure. David Reeves is a key component of helping that program run successfully. In addition to, because Ethan and Brian are both pretty intimately not familiar with the Colorado Department of Transportation financial and operations structure, they're also, even though they're not acting member kind of leaders of the organization, they're essential to keeping some of these projects running smoothly. So, yeah, next slide. So the mission of the TARP program is to enhance cooperative interagency research that improves the safety and effectiveness of avalanche observations. That is a really kind of a nice synthesis of how the group got started. And I think it's kind of important to kind of tell that story. And going back to what Ethan said and the graphic about where are avalanches happening in the United States. And it really is it's fundamentally a Western United States problem. And it's even more niche than that. Not every Western state has a significant enough avalanche problem that they have full-time avalanche forecasting teams and active mitigation. So, we were all sort of aware that of what DOTs were operating avalanche programs, and we would occasionally meet at a conference every other year and talk about what was going on. But as these programs got more involved with more technology and really higher demand for the roadways, we all sort of felt the need that because we were this very niche group of people, we really had some very specific problems that really weren't being met with, they weren't really being met at all by the greater research community, or if they were being met by a vendor or a research group, it was not really up to the kind of mission critical standards that we really need for some of this equipment. So that's really how this pooled fund idea was born. And kind of moving into that, we kind of were able to develop a structure with the pooled fund and come up with a mission statement, come up with some organizational documents. And that all started back in 2016. So the pooled funds run on a 5-year cycle. We're now in the second 5-year cycle. And I think we've had some good success stories so far that I'll kind of highlight later. Next slide. So here's just a general overview of kind of the organizational structure of the TARP program. The lead state is the Colorado Department of Transportation. They're a voting member and they're a part of the technical advisory committee. The technical advisory committee is a group of people who are putting up a certain dollar amount of money on a yearly basis. We typically commit when we start the pooled fund in a 3-year period, and then the pooled funds have run for the 5-year period. So there are 6 members of the technical advisory committee. But we also recognize that because we are such a niche industry that we wanted to sort of involve some of these other programs, even if their financial commitment didn't make them a voting member. So this general membership category, and really the general members the list has grown there from TARP 1 to TARP 2. We now have Department of Transportation programs for all over the world. So Norway, New Zealand, and Canada, as well as many Western US DOTs. So we have monthly meetings. Projects can be voted for if a research group comes to us with a project idea. We typically have a project update presentation and then kind of discuss it amongst ourselves in a closed portion of the meeting, and then eventually vote on those projects. And then in addition to those general members, we've also been in this TARP 2 iteration of the fund. We've allowed for kind of third-party members to come and sit in on some of this project presentation portions of the meeting to generally get an idea of what members are talking about. And those would be consultants or research groups, et cetera. And so we invite them in for that kind of open door portion of the meeting to just get an idea of what's going on. Next slide. So since 2016, in the TARP 1 and TARP 2, we've spent over $1.5 million on numerous research projects. TARP 1, we completed 9 research projects. And now in this TARP 2, we've got 2 projects completed so far, and then we've got 6 active projects. So we are pretty good about trying to get projects, really kind of assess the incoming projects, get them through the CDOT procurement process, and get them the work being completed as soon as possible. And the other part of this is some of these completed projects, again, like I mentioned earlier, we often had these very niche needs for avalanche detection or avalanche mitigation that really we weren't being met by the greater technology available. And a large part of that, it was just that some of the return on investments for some of this technology is not great for some of these vendors. So it was hard for them to commit a bunch of money. So to kind of going into this niche area of work. So a great part about this TARP pooled fund is that we've seen some really nice tech transfer from research that's being done in the TARP projects, and then taking that into standalone companies that are now providing us services that we really need. So next slide. So we'll just kind of run through a couple of the highlights of firm projects that we have funded in years past. During TARP 1, kind of like Ethan mentioned, snow is one of the hardest natural substances on Earth to measure in any kind of accuracy, especially in real time. And so how that new snow falls on a slope is very important to the avalanche hazard. And so we worked with a research group at the University of Utah to develop and refine an instrument called the Differential Emissivity Imaging Distrometer. And basically this instrument can measure on a flake by flake basis the density type and fall velocity of those, and how a storm is changing throughout time and space. And that was really influential for natural avalanche forecasting and direct action avalanches. Next slide. And so similar to what Brian mentioned, most of the TAC members are also part of a group called the American Avalanche Artillery Users Group of North America. So the group of people who are using artillery for avalanche mitigation. And like Brian mentioned, a lot of those programs are working to reduce their dependence on military artillery. And one of the initial, after some of these rack systems were installed, we realized, and the users realized, that there must be a better way to site these specific devices. And so we teamed up with a group from Montana State University to actually measure from a third-party perspective the radius of effect of some of these devices, and that will help us with our rack density planning and making sure we're putting those rack systems in places that are effective, and also having some overlap in case one of the systems doesn't work. You can go to the next slide. This is just sort of a graph of some of the outputs of that study. It shows the overpressure effects. There are some overpressure numbers that need to be achieved, that the snowpack needs to experience to trigger avalanches, and that has a decrease in effectiveness the farther away you get from a certain device. And some of the devices are more directional in nature, and some are more omnidirectional. And so this study really gave us some good, solid data to work with for our planning purposes. And I think to date, this is one of the more effective and widely used outcomes of a TARP project. Next slide. In addition, like I mentioned, the tech transfer, avalanche detection is a very important kind of space in the highway avalanche world. The Wyoming Department of Transportation and the Utah Department of Transportation got involved in a type of avalanche detection called infrasonic. This was back in the kind of early 2000s, and that system was really pretty revolutionary at the time. But again, because of the very niche use cases and the very small number of people who were implementing this technology, that being able to replicate and expand those networks really wasn't an option. So through the TAR project in Boise State, they worked on sort of renovating this form of avalanche detection using infrasound, and then being able to use commonly used equipment and data loggers and be able to expand these networks. So currently this kind of spin-off company called Snowbound Solutions is producing this avalanche detection equipment and is being used in Utah and other state and ski areas around the West. Next slide. And then this is a nice, again, we do have kind of a pretty wide range of different projects. Again, because of the niche nature of our industry, we all as an organization have this question of how are we warning the traveling public, and what is the best way to warn the traveling public of avalanche hazards? So we funded a sort of a synthesis white paper project to sort of survey the different avalanche programs around the country and the world, what type of avalanche signage and warning messaging is being used, and to help offer some best practices and areas of improvement for a given program. And so that was a nice project as well. Next slide. This is just a kind of a quick brief overview of the current active projects. Again, we've got working with various consultants and research groups, trying to improve and refine some of the avalanche detection systems. Really trying to use some instrumentation and trying to refine this idea of how are explosives impacting the different snow layers, and what is the best way to site those devices, and looking at also other ways to how to stop that propagation. So instead of having the large avalanche release, how can we break up these avalanches into somewhat smaller pieces, and again preventing that debris from reaching the roadway? So it's again that's kind of a nice project that's being worked on in Colorado. And then this again idea, like how do you where all these different DOTs are collecting large amounts of data from avalanche records, avalanche mitigation records. How can we better use that data? And now in this kind of new space of AI avalanche forecasting, how can that be best utilized? Next. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great work, Stephen. Yeah, I had a quick question before we get into the Q&A. I noticed that, and I've had the pleasure of attending a couple of the meetings and just listening in the background, but with some of the general members being transportation departments in other countries, how has that international perspective helped kind of shape the research that's occurred there at TARP? And have you been able to transfer any of those ideas that the other countries have already implemented here in the US?
I think it's really valuable. The culture of different governments and their perspective on risk management can be somewhat enlightening. One thing I did wanted to mention too is we finish every meeting with a roundtable discussion, and people kind of go through how their winters are going, any kind of problems or issues, then challenges that people are experiencing just in their day-to-day operations. And arguably, that's some of the most beneficial time during those meetings, is some of that kind of conversational, anecdotal experience sharing. So yeah, having the international component has been very valuable, I would say.
Great, appreciate it. Well, the floor is now open. If anyone has any questions, we'll leave things open for a couple of minutes before we close out. It looks like everything up till now has been answered. Again, if you have any questions for our presenters today, there should be a Q&A button on your toolbar. Just click that, type your question in. We'll give you a couple minutes for that. Also, while we're doing that, Stephen, if anyone has, I know that you mentioned that you guys intake research ideas from external folks. If anyone has like this groundbreaking idea, or if they just want to share something with you guys for consideration, how can they get that idea to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the best way is to probably send an email to myself and Tim Glassett with an idea, and then we can kind of work to uh, kind of hear your initial ideas and thoughts, and then if we feel like it's worth bringing to the group, we can try and schedule in one of those monthly meetings. So I can add my email, can add my
Looks
email
like
to the
Marianne
chat,
beat you to
or
it.
okay, there you go. So
Well, I
yeah,
appreciate it. Yeah.
feel free to email me, and yeah, we'd be happy to. We're always looking for interesting new ideas.
All right. Let's see. I don't see any new questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and oh, we do have one actually from Kirsten. Not a question, but a thanks. March 2019 got stuck between two avalanches, Officers Gulch and Copper Mountain exit. Yep, I totally appreciate the work that you guys do to keep that from oh, just saying thanks. 8 hours on I-70. Wow. Kirsten, you're a trooper. But yeah, I like Kirsten. I appreciate the work that all of you guys do. So kudos. We can move towards closing this out if you guys want to share the next slide. Alrighty. So yeah, thanks for joining us today. I truly appreciate our presenters for bringing this wealth of knowledge. You guys, if you've listened to any of these webinars in the past, you know that I like to touch on, as Stephen mentioned in his own words, a niche topic. There's a lot of stuff going out there as far as how weather affects or impacts roadways, and this is just one of those ways. So if anything is of interest to you as far as weather and its impact on roadways, if there's a specific topic you want to hear about in the future, or if anything really has resonated with you and you want to share it, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information's on there. We can discuss details and figure out if it's something that we can get into the webinar schedule in the future. If you're interested in just getting general program updates, go ahead and subscribe to the Gov delivery there. When we do have updates, we send them out through there. Eventually, we'll get our newsletter back up and running and send things out, send some regular recurring updates out through there. And lastly, the NOCoE folks who hosted us today, NOCoE is a great partner of FHWA, and they do a great job of putting these events on. So go ahead and register at the website there, transportationops.org, to get more information on any of the events that they put on, not just road weather, but across the entire TSMO spectrum. And then lastly, I want to thank all of you for attending. This information is to benefit you. If there's anything that you found exciting or interesting, please share, and we'll continue to do what we keep doing. So with that said, I will let you go, and until next time.